Before changing your engine oil, it's a good idea to allow the bike to warm up to operating temperature. On this particular model, the crankcase and the transmission use the same oil. On some models, the crankcase oil and the transmission oil are different and have separate drain plugs. You should refer to your service manual before starting this procedure. Some of the oil is stored in the frame, which acts as an oil cooler, so we will need to drain the engine and the frame. It's a good idea to use some gloves. The engine oil is going to be very warm. First, we're going to remove the drain plug, which is in the engine. If you have a skid plate, most of the times there is a hole cut out to allow you to access the drain plug. Next, we are going to remove the frame drain plug. With our oil completely drained from our frame and engine, we can go ahead and reinstall our drain plugs. It's a good idea to make sure your seal washer is still installed on our drain plug. Also, it's a good idea to replace these after several oil changes. You only want to use these maybe 3 or 4 times before throwing them away and getting new ones. Next, we are going to remove the oil filter. Take note that there is an arrow facing upwards on this cover. This is the way it needs to be reinstalled. You want to loosen the 3 nuts first before removing them. Before installing your new oil filter, it's a good idea to clean the area where the oil filter cover and O-ring rest against the case. Any debris in between the cover and the engine will cause the O-ring to leak. Also, you can wipe out the old dirty oil. Before installing your new oil filter and the cover, it's a good idea to clean the cover thoroughly and clean the O-ring. It's a good idea to inspect the O-ring very carefully. The O-ring is just like your seal washers. It can be used 3 or 4 times, but after that it's a good idea just to go and purchase a new one. On this particular model, there is a spring in the cover. On some models, the spring will be inside the engine case. And a neat little trick to hold the O-ring in the cover is to take some grease, apply it to your O-ring, and install it in your cover. This will hold the O-ring in while installing your cover. Some models have an O-ring in between the oil filter and the engine case. You need to make sure this O-ring gets replaced. It's very important to make sure this O-ring is reinstalled. On some models, there is a rubber grommet on the oil filter and comes with the new oil filter. So I apply a little bit of grease to my O-ring and install it on the protrusion in the engine case. Next, I'm going to pre-soak my oil filter in the engine oil that I'm going to use. I've poured about a half a quart of oil into a container. Just soak the oil filter thoroughly. And install the oil filter. Make sure you're installing it correctly. On this model, the opening goes towards the engine. Next, we can install our cover. Make sure our O-ring is installed properly, our arrows pointing towards the top. Apply pressure to the cover and hold it while we finger tighten all the nuts. You can snug them up. And tighten to your proper specification. On this particular model, there is only one engine fill, which is on the frame. What you do is pour about a full quart of oil into the frame, start the bike up, run the bike for about a minute, shut the bike off, let it sit for about a minute, and then top off oil as needed. But it's also a good idea to use some contact cleaner or brake cleaner to clean around your fill plug so no debris gets down inside your oil. Make sure you use safety glasses when using brake cleaner or contact cleaner. Now we can go ahead and remove the fill plug. Make sure you use your manufacturer's specified oil. And slowly pour in about 1 full quart of oil. After we have a quart of oil in the bike, we can go ahead and install our fill plug, and then we can start the motorcycle, let it run for 30 seconds to a minute, shut the bike off, and we're going to add more oil. Also, it's very important when checking your oil level that the bike is perfectly straight up and down and on a level surface. After we've let the bike run for about a half a minute to a minute, we've let it sit for about the same amount of time. Now we're going to remove our fill plug, which also has a dipstick, and we're just going to go ahead for fun and check the oil level. Nothing should register on the dipstick. Take note, with some models, you just simply rest the fill plug and dipstick without threading it in to check the oil level. Other models, you thread it in to check the oil level. Refer to your owner's manual to find out which one your model bike is. There is no oil on this dipstick. This is the way it should be. Now that I've added my oil, I'm going to go ahead and check my oil level. I'm going to install my dipstick, pull it back out. There's still no oil on my dipstick. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more oil and check my level. You want to be careful not to add too much oil. I only added about 100 cc's. Our oil is indicating in the halfway mark. So what I'm going to do now is run the bike to its operating temperature, shut the bike off, allow it to sit for about a half a minute, and recheck our oil level. We're still about halfway between our hash marks, so we can go ahead and top it off with a tiny bit of oil.